Hey traders, this is Blake Morrow with Trader Summit. And for the very first time here, don't know why it's just the first time, but I'm super excited to have Mr. Adam Button, Chief Currency Analyst over at Forex Live. Everybody knows Forex Live. I've been a big fan of you guys for decades. It seems like decades, at least over 10 years now. Great to have you here, Adam.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Blake. Glad to be here with you.
Yeah, a spur of the moment, I got an opportunity to speak with you shortly about the Canadian economy. You're located in Canada, and you deal with currencies, but more importantly, you're really sensitive to some of the subject matter in Canada from a monetary policy standpoint, politics, what's happening in your currency, what's happening in your markets, real estate. And I just kind of wanted to expand that conversation today because I think you're the perfect person to have boots on the ground. You understand globally what's going on. And so I'm just so happy to have you here.
It's an interesting time to be talking about that because coming out of COVID, everything in monetary policy and economies got into sync, right? Everybody cut to zero. Everybody kind of came out of COVID, except for China, at the same time and in the same way. And now we're starting to see the divergences, and that's the next big macro trade. And I think Canada is certainly going to be one of them.
Yeah, it's interesting to have this. Everybody kind of moved in harmonious fashion, if you will, with central banks, and everybody kind of moved together. But now it's going to be more of a challenge, and that divergence of monetary policy is really going to make. I keep telling people this; they don't really believe me, but I keep telling people this. The next couple of years are going to be the place to be. Is going to be in the currency market because we're going to be right in the middle of the tornado, right?
Yeah, it's funny because for so long it's just been the risk on, risk off, a little bit of commodity strength, you go here, a little bit of, this economy is doing a little bit better. But I think, yeah, we're really on the cusp of some big kind of macro changes, and it is going to lead to some huge moves. Like right now, I would say I'm more bearish on the Canadian dollar than I think I've ever been, outside of global macro events that were causing pain. But just on the differential side or the economic performance side, there's a lot to worry about right now.
So let me ask you this: when you say I'm bearish the Canadian dollar, is that against every currency, or are you more bullish the dollar Canadian, or are you more bearish the Canadian yen? Where do you see the opportunities, best opportunities to be short Canadian dollars? And with that being said, why are you so bearish the Canadian economy or Canadian dollar, so to speak?
Yeah, I'll take the second one first. The number one is housing. And I don't think, there's been a lot of housing bubbles and a lot of housing booms in a lot of places. But aside from really Canada, Australia, a couple places in Europe, there's nothing to that magnitude as what we've had here. To put it into perspective, and I'm about an hour outside of Toronto, an hour and a half outside of Toronto. Just a very modest suburban house here is $700,000. In Toronto, you're looking at double that. And it's like that countrywide, and it's just gone way too far. And the affordability, it got goosed a lot during COVID. I could get a mortgage then sub 2% for 5 years, but the whole Canadian mortgage market works on a 5-year term. So if you got lucky enough to get a low rate in 2021, by 2026, it's going up. And every single day, people are refinancing at much higher rates, and it's just sucking consumer spending out of the economy. Today, we had Canadian retail sales. The December numbers were fine, but the January advance number look poor. And I think we're just going to see that headwind grow and grow and grow. Even if the Bank of Canada cuts rates, which I think they should right now, we'll see some pain. And whether it manifests in lower house prices or lower consumer spending, ultimately there is going to be a huge drag in the Canadian economy from that, I think, for a generation.
So, I kind of staying along the subject line, but I was just having a conversation about commercial real estate. And before you talk about, where you're bearish the Canadian currency at, or, most against, let's talk a little bit about rates, because you touched on housing, residential, but commercial real estate, a lot of this is, going to affect the commercial real estate market. How's the outlook look there in Canada for commercial real estate?
It's similar. I think it's similar worldwide. There's this battle between back to the office and staying at home. A lot of commercial terms are 7 years, sometimes 10 years. So you have this slow motion reset of these mortgages. People come back to refi. The buildings aren't worth as much as they used to be. Maybe it goes into bankruptcy. Maybe there's enough equity there. But you keep seeing these instances of banks in the US right now that run into trouble. One advantage that Canada does have is it's really just five big banks in this country, extremely well capitalized, essentially government backed, and pretty well regulated. So they've been warned about this for a long, long time. You never know if somebody got out over their skis. That's what's always so scary about banking. But you're not going to have these small banks sort of getting picked off like in the US and this sort of fright. I think it actually ends up falling a lot more just on the consumers and on the businesses and on the owners of those. But I'm not super concerned about commercial real estate, but when you talk to some people who are knee deep in it, they're very, very worried. So um, it's one of those risks that are there, but it's been so well flagged that it's hard to believe. It's like they always say in trading, like once everybody knows it's a risk, it never seems to
Manifest.
yeah, in
Yeah.
the way that's going to cause a lot of pain. But the whole real estate market it's a tough one right now.
So, going back to the question, where do you see the opportunities being short Canadian dollars? Is it against the dollar, or is it against any other currencies out there that you find even more attractive?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the dollar a lot. I'm pretty bullish on the US dollar. I think, you look out today and you say, okay, who's driving the market? NVIDIA, just a massive day, huge boom in that. All the tech companies in America are crushing it. And if you think of, say, I'm in Europe or say I'm in Asia and I want to invest in technology, I mean, the US is the only game in town. I would love to see some more European companies. There are a few in Canada, a few in Europe, maybe a few more in Asia, but none are dominating like a company like NVIDIA is or Microsoft or Apple. So, it speaks to American competitiveness. At some point, things get ahead of themselves in the United States, and the dollar gets a little bit too strong. And I look at something like the Mexican pesos had a nice run. It's doing what Canada used to do, which was manufacture things and export them to the United States. I mean, you have a secular trend of offshoring from China, reshoring from China. A lot of people would like to see that go to the US, but most of that money is going to go to Mexico. And you're close there. If Mexico could ever sort itself out, and it's been interesting seeing El Salvador sort itself out in like 5 years from the murder capital of the world to hardly any murders. Capital will chase that. So there's a big opportunity in Mexico, all of Latin America, a lot of commodities there as well, which I'm pretty bullish on. And then, some places in Southeast Asia are attractive, but I really have no time right now for Europe. I don't think those economies are competitive. I don't think governments care that they're not competitive. Yeah, maybe if the euro gets cheap enough, or the pound gets cheap enough, something good could happen, but I'm really not holding my breath.
Wow. So it seems like at this point you're just really more of a dollar bull. Well, let's talk, since we're talking on a historic day. I say historic because we're at all-time highs. Nvidia just reported, and I mean, as you mentioned earlier, it's blood earnings carrying the markets to all-time highs. How do you feel about overall global economy and where markets sit currently? Because I know you have a view not only of the U.S. as a neighbor of the U.S. and sitting, as in your own words, on the doorstep of the U.S., but also you at Forex Live, you look at everything. So where's your global view of the economy and where markets sit right now?
I mean, it's a little bit of, I mean, we're up today like 93 points in the S&P 500, 400 in the NASDAQ. So it always kind of raises your worry level up a little bit. But I look at kind of the macro landscape, and you have the Fed at 525, between 525 and 550. If anything goes wrong, that's a lot of ammunition, right? So at some point, something will go wrong. You have a huge Fed put, one that we haven't had for 20 years. And so say the economy keeps rolling, 2.5% growth, great, rates can stay up here, everything is fine, consumer balance sheets are fine. And eventually something cracks, well, help is on the way. There are a few places with that much of a cushion. And I think they're all going to be cutting rates first. But there still is a lot in the global economy in terms of a tailwind from lower rates, whether it's now or later. And I think, people were hung up on whether the Fed's going to cut in May, June, July. But they are going to cut, and when things get rough, they're going to be there. So I think things can run a lot further than people might expect. Obviously, the timing of that is tricky, and the way that markets work right now, with people just piling into different asset classes at record speed, it's different, or maybe it's not different to all of history, but it's reminiscent of 2021 or 2000 or 1999. And that makes me a bit worried, but it's a lot of it's justified. I mean, these companies are doing amazing things in a revolutionary technology. So, that I think I'm pretty optimistic about at least the American economy. One thing I do worry about on the macro side, to take it in a different direction, is immigration. There's a global secular trend against immigration that's bubbled up in a lot of countries. Australia just cut their immigration in half. You see it in America. I mean, the numbers aren't even that high in America, but the sentiment is aggressively. And Canada, from here, it's been just stark, because Canada's the most open country to immigrants in the world, probably. And it's reversed entirely within the span of maybe a year. And the sentiment here now is like, shut it down altogether. I think 1 million people came into Canada in the last year, in a country of 38 million. So it's like the US adding something like 10 million people. And it's just, it'll be interesting to see, because a lot of Canadian GDP growth, for instance, has been immigration. Like, per capita GDP's fallen. And if you take away that leg of growth, say you take it away everywhere, because I think in Europe, the sentiment is, we've seen some of the elections in Europe have been very anti-immigrant as well. And I don't really see a lot of discussion on that. Maybe it's a little bit taboo in the macro sense, but there will be a big macro impact from that, but depending on where it lands.
And I guess if you add on top of that the protectionism factor that's now very prevalent here in the U.S., and it probably is, and will continue to grow in most countries. Between that and immigration, could shake up the global landscape a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I mean, you ultimately look at those things, you say, well, that has to be negative for global growth, right? And at some level, so it'll be interesting to see. I see America more and more as this country just dedicated to winning, and not really like a principled, let's open up the world for trade and compete, but it's like state-sponsored winning. And America is winning on its own in most industries, and then there are a few where it might not have been winning, and then there's like state backing, right, for chip fabs, which they're doing near you, or steel. They're trying to bring that back with protectionism. So you have America really, really flexing its muscle right now, which I think is going to be a huge boom for America. But eventually, Europe or Canada or the rest of the world says, like, these are the rules we signed up for. And if we're not playing by those, we're going to lock off our own economy and punish Apple or Microsoft or whoever. And I think, that maybe that unfolds slowly, which I think it probably does, because there's a lot of poor leaders out there who have really no vision. But that's probably like 10 or 20 years out that I think that starts to reverse. But I really think this is just going to be a golden age in America.
Wow. Well, it's great to hear, and especially great to hear from somebody that, like I said, from your point of view, where you're at in Canada. Adam, I'm a big fan of yours. I have been for many years. And the one thing that Canada's got, well, they got a couple of things. They've got Spotify, which is a hell of a company, and then they got Forex Live. So, and they got Adam Button. But I want to say thank you for being here on the Trader Summit. What's the best way for traders to follow your work? Because I know where to find you, but where do most traders find what you do?
Yeah, we're there. Anytime the market's open at Forex Live, me and a few other guys are dotted around the world, and we kind of write about things as they happen, trying to make sense of those moves, those gap moves in the FX market, or in global macro, any kind of news that's hitting. We're trying to figure out what it means and why, and give you a little bit of a backstory on why it's moving the market right now and why it might continue to. So it's certainly a market filled with headline risk right now, and I think it's a great market for us. And every economic data point is a market mover right now. So it's just a wonderful time to be a macro trader, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
All right. Well, Adam, thank you so much for spending your time here on the Trader Summit. And I'm going to be reaching out to you soon to have you back on.
Anytime, Blake. Such a pleasure to talk with you.
All right. Have a great one. And thanks for tuning in. And guys, gals, if you like what Adam had to say, make sure you give him a thumbs up. Jump down in the comments down below if you wanted to, maybe add to maybe some of this discussion. And we appreciate you listening. We'll catch you on the next video. Hey traders, Blake Morrow here. Thanks for stopping by our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also click the bell notifications so you do not miss any of our market-related trading analysis from some of the leading industry experts. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you in the next video.